Please mute the mics. Hope you can hear me right. Please mute the mics. Okay, please mute the mics. Okay. So in the last class we were talking about isolation issues, right? So now today we'll talk about the remaining isolation issues, right? So we have discussed about a couple of isolation issues, right? What are they? Yes, if you could please recollect once. So what are the two isolation issues which we discussed? One is lost update and the other one is dirty read. Yeah, one is lost update, the other one is dirty read, right? So here today we are going to discuss about the other two isolation issues. One is repeatable read isolation issue. Yes. So what is repeatable read isolation issue? Yes. Can someone tell me what is repeatable read? Unrepeatable read. I'm sorry, not repeatable read. Unrepeatable read. Unrepeatable read. What is unrepeatable read? Unrepeatable read means, when a transaction reads the data or record twice, transaction reads record twice, each time it will get a different result. Each time it will get a different result. Yes. Okay. That is unrepeatable read. It won't get the same result each time. Instead, it will get a different result here. Yes. So, why you'll get this issue? What do you people think? Is it the transaction when it is reading the record twice? Okay. When a transaction is reading the record twice, each time it will get a different result. So, what's the reason for this issue? Yes, what is the result for what is the reason for this issue? Because you see, when this transaction is reading, maybe some other transaction is trying to update the same row. Okay, yes. Maybe there is another transaction which is trying to update that row, you know. Yes, not commits, yeah. While other one is reading, yes. You'll find that we got two transactions. Let's say transaction A and B. Let's say transaction A is reading the data. Transaction A, reads, let's say read one, reading the data. And here, after this transaction reads the data, again, maybe it has got some processing to do. Okay, after the first read, in between, let's say there is another transaction which is updating the same record. Both the transactions are operating on the same record. So after the transaction B updates, maybe transaction A will again read data. Okay. Yes. So this time the transaction A will get a different result. Though it is trying to read the same record, it may get different results. Okay. Yes. May get a different result. So here sometimes this can be an issue. So how it can be an issue? What do people think? How it can be an issue? See, for suppose if you consider transfer of funds, okay, transfer of funds from one account to another account, you will find that let's say the user who initiates the transfer, say initially, okay, will add the pay details and all, right? Generally the application or bank application which I'm using, what it does is basically it will ask you to provide the pay details, and after that you will get a screen where you will be confirming the pay details, and then what you will do is here you have to specify the amount which you want to transfer, and you see when you are specifying the amount which you want to transfer, you will find that it will also display the balance in our account. What it does, okay, when it asks, when the application prompts us to supply the amount or provide the amount, the transfer amount which needs to be transferred, so it will also show you the balance. Let's say, for example, in my account I got 10,000. It is showing the balance as 10,000 and it is asking how much to transfer from 10,000. So I will specify the amount as 8,000. Okay, I'll see that okay, the balance is 10,000. So here I want to transfer 8,000. So you see, once I provide that amount, you see, initially I said the application is displaying the amount as 10,000, right? In our balance, in my balance. That means already the application has done a read operation, right? It has fetched the record. The application has already done a read operation. It has fetched a record. Now this time here, you see, the application is again, okay, you see, I'm sorry, it has read the record, it is displaying that balance amount, right? The balance in the account, it is displaying it as 10,000. And you see here, now I will specify 8,000 this amount to transfer. Okay, and I'll submit. Click on the transfer button, let's say. So when I do that, you know what, let's say all of a sudden I'll get an error that the transaction failed because of transfer of funds transaction has failed because of insufficient funds, let's say. Okay, but there was 10,000. Now actually I've specified 8,000. The transfer amount was 8,000. So it should be sufficient, right? There is sufficient balance to transfer. So why it is throwing an error? Maybe in between some other transaction would have updated the balance of this account to 5,000. That means, say in your account now you got only 5,000, not 10,000. So you cannot transfer to 8,000 now. So this may happen. Got it? So how to address this issue now? How to address this issue? Yes. How to address this issue? What do people think? Update log. No, but the thing is here, initially the transaction was not updating the record, right? So you see the transfer of funds transaction was just reading the balance of this customer and displaying that balance amount to the customer so that customer can understand with the balance amount. Okay, he will know what is the balance amount and accordingly specify the amount to withdraw. No, sorry, to transfer, right? So how you take an update lock here? So that means you're saying write lock should be obtained. Yes, that's right. If so, so here, you know, the transaction which is performing the read operation, the transaction which is performing the read operation, now it should obtain a write lock, right? Exclusive write lock. It should obtain an exclusive write lock itself. Yes, it should obtain an exclusive write lock. So if it obtains an exclusive write lock, okay, if it obtains an exclusive write lock, you will find that the transaction, the reading transaction, okay, if it obtains exclusive write lock, then till the trading transaction completes the execution or completes the transaction, okay, and then it commits the rollbacks till that time, reading transaction till it commits or rollbacks till that time, you will find that no other transaction will be able to update this record. No other transaction will be able to update this record. Okay. So now a transaction which reads the record has to obtain the write lock. Okay. Yes, that will address this issue. Right? If you obtain the write lock here, that will address the issue. Yes. Okay. Hope you people got it. So how can we set that isolation level? How can we set that isolation level here? What is it? What it is known as? The isolation level which you have to set here is Sorry, here itself we have specified isolation level specified as repeatable rate. Yes, this will address the issue. Okay, fine. So is it clear for you people? Any doubts in this regard? Okay, so hope this is clear for you people. Yeah. Now let's move on. Here we got another isolation issue that is known as phantom rate. Phantom rate. Yes, can someone explain me what is phantom rate? Phantom rate. Yes. Phantom rate problem is also very much similar to your repeatable rate. Okay. There is only one difference. What is it? You will find that in case of unrepeatable rate, you will find that the transaction will be reading only one record. Okay. In case of unrepeatable rate, the transaction is only reading one record. Okay. Yes. And you will find that here each time, okay, it reads the record, you get a different result. That is what happens, right? But in case of phantom rate, instead of one record, the transaction, instead of reading one record, it reads multiple records. Instead of reading one record, it will read multiple records. And each time it reads the record, you know, it will get, sorry, instead of reading one record, see, it will read multiple records also. So for the first time, when the transaction rates for the first time, maybe it will get 10 records. Okay. Yes. So it will be dealing with multiple records here. So for the first time when the transaction is reading, maybe it will get 10 records. The same transaction again here, when it executes the same query, fetch the records, this time it may get 8 records only. Instead of 10, it may get 8 records only. Okay, or let's say first time when it read the records, it got 15 records. Second time, maybe it got only 10 records. Or it may get more records also. Instead of 15, it may get 20 records also. The same query, when it is executing twice, you will find that here, 2 different times, you get 2 different results. Yes. You know how this can be an issue? Okay. How this can be an issue? What do people think? How this can be an issue? Yes. No idea? Okay. You see, let's say a transaction is executing an aggregate function, let's say average or something like that. Aggregate function, like average. And based on the result, based on the average which it gets, maybe it has to further process the request. Based on that average which it gets, it has to further process the request. Okay, yes. Here, you see, maybe it has to first find out the average, it takes the acceptance from the user, then only it has to process the request again. So, each time it reads the average, maybe the average is different from the same table or record. So from the same table, you see, a set of records. Okay, the records which are fetched, it is trying to find out the average for some value, let's say. First time, you got a different result. Second time, you got a different result. Okay, yes. So maybe this will affect the way the transaction executes. Okay, each time you get a different result. That is a problem. So in that case, what you will do here, we have that transaction has to obtain a write log in the complete table, right? The transaction has to obtain a write log on the complete table because we are dealing with multiple records here. Okay, yes. because we are dealing with multiple records. So whichever transaction is reading the record or writing the records has to obtain an exclusive read lock and write lock. It has to obtain both the locks now. Whichever transaction is, whatever the transaction it is, whether it is read or write, has to obtain both the locks. This will address the issue. But actually this isolation level is known as serializable. Actually this will be a rare case. This will be a rare case. And generally you won't set the isolation level to serializable. If you set the isolation level to serializable, here transactions have to execute serially one after the other, because a reading transaction will obtain both the read lock and write lock. A writing transaction also does the same. It will obtain both read and write locks. Okay, yes, that means if one transaction is executing, all other transactions have to wait till the transaction finishes execution. Okay? Yes. So the transactions will execute serially one after the other. Yes. So if this is the case, will there be an issue? If this is the case, will there be an issue? Yes. Definitely will have an issue, right? Yes. What will be the issue here? That is what I want you to tell me. What will be the issue? Performance wise, you see, if transactions execute serially one after the other, what happens? See, the response time will be very high, right? It will take more time. Yes, the performance of the application also will go down drastically. It's a big performance hit. There will be a problem. Yes. So generally that's the reason why you won't set this selection level most of the times. Yeah. Okay. So these are the different isolation levels which we have. Okay, for the isolation issues which we have discussed. So what are the isolation issues which we have discussed? We have gone through last update, dirty read, and unrepeatable read. The last one is phantom read. Yes, we got four different types of transaction issues. Okay, yes, and here we got appropriate isolation levels which we can use to address these issues. Okay, so this way you see we can actually configure the transaction behavior. So actually we are not explicitly dealing with the transaction, right? So using this transaction attributes like you see propagation, timeout, isolation, we will be defining the transaction behavior. And who will be executing this? The transaction advice. The transaction advisor is there, no? So the transaction advisor will be making sure that it executes these transactions. Yes, based on the transaction behavior which we have configured. So we saw that there is a predefined bean class called as transaction interceptor, which is basically an advice class which should take care of those advices, right? Yes. Okay, fine. You know what? Here, transaction behavior, transaction attributes are propagation, timeout, and isolation. So there are a few more transaction attributes. Okay, you will see them. So first of all, okay, for exception, actually that is the only one which is left out actually. Exception. You know, we can configure the details about the transaction behavior when an exception rises. When an exception rises, what exactly should happen? When an exception rises, what exactly should happen? Yes, the transaction in that case, should it commit or roll back? Okay, for if you want, for few exceptions, if you don't want to roll back the transaction, yes, you can configure that details also. Okay, or for which type of exceptions you want to roll back, for which type of exceptions you want to roll back. So you can also configure those details. Okay, yes. Here, you see no rollback or rollback for which type of exception. Specify the details. Just for let's say java.lang.scale exception. I want to roll back. Yes. Just again, sorry. So you can import that class and specify the details. This way. So basically, I want to roll back the exception. Sorry, roll back the transaction. I won't roll back the transaction when we got SQL, if there is any SQL exception. Okay, in the target method, we got SQL exception, then I won't roll back the transaction. Yes. Okay. Here, similarly, even for few exceptions, so you don't want to roll back the exception, sorry, transaction. For a few exceptions, let's say you don't want to roll back the transaction. Even you can specify those details here. So for suppose for runtime exception, I don't want to roll back the exception. No rollback for, say, here, if I do this, what happens? You will find that if there is a runtime exception in the target method, then the transaction will not be rolled back. The transaction will not be rolled back here. So this way, you can configure the details about the exceptions for which you don't want to roll back the transaction. Okay. So this is about the transactions. Now here, as of now, we are trying to use this transaction management for the Hibernate, right? Hibernate framework. Yes. What if I want to use transaction management or transaction advice, which is provided by Spring for JDBC, Spring JDBC. Let's say I'm using Spring JDBC instead of JDBC. Okay. Assume that I'm using Spring JDBC instead of, sorry, I'm using Spring JDBC here. Okay, in the framework I'm using Spring JDBC. Then what am I supposed to do? Yes, what changes I'm supposed to do here? Can you tell me? Assume that this DO method which you're dealing with, the DO method, let's say it is using Spring JDBC. Okay, yes. So in that case, what are the changes you are supposed to do? What changes you are supposed to do? Yes. Just a minute, please. Just a minute. Yeah, I'm sorry. So assume that this DO methods add product and all. Let's say you're using Spring JDBC. So what changes we have to do here? Where we have to make the changes? Are we supposed to do or make any changes here? You know, the annotations, the configurations which you got here, you won't modify anything here. Okay? You will not modify this. This will be intact. You have to make the changes in the configuration file itself. You have to make the changes in the configuration file. Okay? Yes. So in the configuration file, what changes we have to do? Let's see. You know, actually, in case of JDBC, you won't have this issue like the issue which we had earlier. Like, I'll show you. Just a second. So all you need to do is First of all, you have to configure a transaction advice. Sorry, what we have to do here, we have to do few changes here itself. So what you're looking at, okay, this Hibernate Transaction Manager, it works for Hibernate framework. Okay, if the DAO is using Hibernate, if you want to apply the advice, then you will use Hibernate Transaction Manager. So in our case, our DAO is not using Hibernate. Let's say our DAO is not using Hibernate. Instead, it is using Spring JDBC. So what to do? So you have to configure a transaction manager called as data source transaction management. Data source transaction manager. We have to configure the dependencies that data source object. Yeah, that's it. So now you'll find that there is one more thing, one more change which you have to do. What is it? You have configured the transaction manager, right? What is the next thing you have to do? When you are in front, it is clearly configured here in front of you. There's only one change here which you have to do. Yes. So here TX annotation driven, right? At element TX annotation driven. There we have configured the transaction manager bean details. You configure the transaction manager bean details, right? So instead of Hibernate transaction manager, now you have to configure this new transaction manager. What is it? Data source transaction. So just a second. So reference so now in the TX annotation level, then what you will do, instead of configuring Hybrid Transaction Manager, we have to configure this data source transaction manager here. That's the difference. Okay. So let's do that. Even though you have configured that as a transaction manager, it will not be used now. Yes. So this way, for each type of API or for each type of framework, persistence framework, you will have an appropriate transaction manager. You will have an appropriate transaction manager. Okay. Yes. And accordingly, we have to use it. And see what dependencies you have to supply. You have to check that. In this case, the dependency is just the data source object. Yes. So definitely this time it should work. You can try this. Yeah. Okay. So with this, we are done with this transaction management. Actually, there is one more doubt. So here, if we use data source transaction manager, what about the transaction advice bean, predefined transaction advice bean? Will it be a different bean or will it be same bean? So there won't be any difference over there. Still, you'll be using the same bean. Okay, what is it? We got transaction interceptor, right? Transaction interceptor. So you'll be using the transaction interceptor itself. Here also, you'll be using transaction interceptor beans. Yes. Okay. So now here there is one more application of PSN, right? There is one more application for the EOP. What is it? You know, the other application of AOP is security. Okay, security code. But it's actually a totally different module which we have to discuss now in security. But just this security is not just based on the aspects. Okay, it won't. It will take the help of aspects. Along with it, you'll find that here it will also take the help of filters. If it is web applications, it will take the help of filters as well. Yes. Here, when we talk about Spring Security, it's a module in Spring Framework. And you know what? Here, there have been many changes done to this module. This is the most uh, highlighted module, I can say. What I have noticed it, this is the only module which has undergone rapid changes. since its introduction. Okay, yes. You will find that when we talk about security here, we'll be dealing with authorization and authentication. Yes. You know, earlier in Spring Framework, actually the Spring Security module itself was called as ACETI Security. Actually, there was an open source community which was providing a security framework called as ACEITE, but actually as of now you won't find it much in use. Slowly Spring people have transformed it to Spring Security. Now we call it as Spring Security. And as I said, there are rapid changes which have been made uh, to this module. Now it is, I'll tell you one good news, it is easy to use. Okay, you can easily use it, not at all a problem. Yeah, so as I said, Spring Security deals with both authorization and authentication. So authentication, you people are very much aware of it. It is basically used to validate. Authentication is all about validating the user, checking whether the credentials which are provided by the user are valid. That is what the authentication does, checking whether the user is a valid user or not, okay, whether the credentials which are provided by the user, credentials means the name, password and all, okay, whether the credentials provided by the user are valid or not. That is what the authentication does. And you will find that in security, you have to also deal with the authorization sometimes. You have to deal with authorization also. What about authorization? You know, you will find that authorization deals with role-based access concept, role-based access. So for suppose if I've got a resource, if a user is trying to access that resource, checking whether the user might be a valid user. Okay, the user is authenticated already, the user is a valid user, but still when a user is trying to access a resource, checking whether this user has got the privileges to access this resource or not. Checking whether the user has got the privileges to access this resource or not. Okay, that is what authorization does. So if the user is having the privileges, appropriate privileges to access the resource, then only the user will be allowed to access the resource. Otherwise, the user will be denied. User will be denied the access here. User will not be allowed to access the resource. So that is what happens. Oh, you people got it. So, you know what? Whatever the functionalities or features of security which I'm talking about, like authentication and authorization, can be dealt by the Spring Security. Spring Security will take care of both authentication and authorization here. Yes. Fine. Hope you people got it. So, how to use the Spring Security? That is what we'll learn in the next class. Okay. So we'll see how to work with the Spring Security. So we are almost done. I believe I need just a couple of classes to complete this Spring Security. Okay. And then we'll move on to the web services concept. Okay, fine. So I'll stop it here today.